Welcome back to my channel. Section B of the political and social protest writing paper is going to be the focus of this video, looking at the Kite Runner, A Doll's House and Blake's poetry and showing you how to use the texts in order to answer three past questions that have come up in recent years. For Section B, students will have one question about one text each, and they should pick the task which I suppose they feel most confident with, or which they feel that they could do most with. Okay, so that is going to be the focus of today's video. The first question is a question that I think was quite popular when it came up a couple of years ago, which is about masculinity being toxic in the Kite Runner. All the male characters are vile. And as is usually the case with a Section B question, it always finishes with to what extent do you agree, because you are perfectly in your rights to disagree with this completely if you wanted to. So assuming that you wanted to write 3 paragraphs in your answer in an hour, your first paragraph could be about Asef, who is representative of the childhood bully and threat to the harmony of childhood. You could talk about how he behaves in chapter 5 and chapter 7. And then you could talk about when he grows up into an adult, he becomes a member of the Taliban. So you could say his nationalist extremist agenda as a child in the earlier chapters perfectly foregrounds his ability to become a Talib in the later chapters as well. He is somebody that believes intersection of physical violence is a relatively good way to govern. And he legitimizes his violence by thinking theocratically and saying, like a lot of people do, for example, with the Taliban, which is God is on their side to do this. One of the quickest ways to feel legitimate in what you're doing is to feel like God is on your side. And if you look at the speech that the cleric gives before the stoning of the Ghazi Stadium, you see there the language is very much to do with justifying their actions and their violence by saying God is okay with it. So I would hope we would all agree that Asef is, in fact, a very toxic character and also a very vile human being. The second paragraph could be General Tahiri, who isn't as awful as Asef, but within the domestic sphere of the Tahiris' family does represent an oppressive and tyrannical father figure. He has banned his wife from singing in public, and he has also punished Soraya for running away with a man from Virginia and effectively forcing her to cut all her hair off in years gone by. He is also very suspicious of Amir and is not a particularly easy character to get to know. He is very, you could say, arrogant. He believes in pride, or Nang and the Moose, as it's called in this novel. And you could also link as well to chapter 25, where at the dining table, once Sorab has been brought back to America, he makes the mistake of calling Sorab a Hazara boy. And Amir finally stands up to him and says, "You will not call him that in my presence. He has a name and it's Sorab." So General Tahiri could also be seen as a relatively vile male character as well, not particularly likable. Very different to Baba, for example, who actually might have his flaws, but perhaps is much more noble than General Tahiri is. General Tahiri, for example, refuses to work. He also is on welfare and food stamps, both of which Baba refuses to take, and he also does work. Baba does. So the two older characters, the two father figures, are contrasted here. So you could use those two characters to agree that indeed masculinity could be toxic. However, one key character that you could use to disagree with this is, of course, Hassan. Because Hassan embodies loyalty, sacrifice, and goodness. That's why in chapter 7, during the vignettes of memory that Amir has during the rape scene, Amir calls him that he has a look of the lamb. And that links to the Eid festival. So, and then later in the chapter, he is executed by the Taliban in cold blood for standing up for the truth. He says he's legitimately in the house. They say he's trespassing. They want the house. And then ironically, they become the trespassers by squatting in somebody else's house. So he dies for the truth. He makes Amir look very corrupt because Hassan is so loyal and so good. And he is, of course, representative of the bullied and victimized group of people. He is representative of the Hazara race and who never fights back and who is mainly a pacifist, really. Wouldn't really hurt a fly. Always takes the blame for Amir's actions, even through trivial things like hitting the neighbour's dog with walnuts, I believe. So Hassan is your main source, I would argue, of disagreement with this task. You cannot say all the male characters are vile when you have a character like Hassan in it. That doesn't mean you have to talk about Hassan in your essay, but if you wanted to disagree with this task, that would be, I would think, the best way to go about it. So that could be a 3 paragraphs in answer to the question there. For A Doll's House, we're talking here about the lack of economic independence, and it's no surprise with A Doll's House that the question for section B is about money. There have been numerous questions now over the years which have been about finance and money, and this is one of them, and it's about Nora's oppression. So your first paragraph is talking about money just generally. You could talk about coverture, how the men have complete financial control, and how Nora goes against that by having the economic independence to take the money out, the loan out, and then work in secret in the attic to pay it off. In so doing, she is sacrificing her innocence for her husband's survival, although he never seems to acknowledge that. And Nora's forgery of the IOU gives Krogstad the fuel to blackmail her, and that ends as a catalyst for the end of the marriage. So you could talk about the fact that it's the lack of economic independence which is the reason why Nora does feel oppressed in this house, and of course the atmosphere of the home kind of metaphorically represents that. But you could disagree, and you could actually say that Nora's oppression has absolutely nothing to do with money at all. You could say that the play is indicative of a more societal oppression, much more to do with marriage. So marriage is an institution which entraps and oppressive women in particular. Remember, Ibsen said that a woman cannot be herself in modern society. And clearly, with that perspective, Ibsen is challenging, if not attacking, the entrapping nature and oppressive nature of marriage, which is represented metaphorically through the house, which gets more and more claustrophobic as the play progresses and more full of secrets and lies and tension. At the end, when she emancipates herself democratically from that house, she is setting herself free in order to seek the truth of society. She's basically said, what I've learned about society, if I've learned anything at all, might not be accurate. I need to go and find out myself, and I'm not going to do so if I stay in this house. So the reason why she leaves that house is because of the societal oppression placed on married mothers. You know, Halma says, before Allows you are a wife and mother. And she says, no, I'm not. I'm a human being. So she's deliberately going against this kind of societal message that women got sent. So it's nothing to do with money, maybe. It's marriage in itself, which is the issue there. So you could maybe use that as your second paragraph to disagree. Your third paragraph for this, you could actually say again, it's nothing to do with money. It's all to do with Halma. Halma as representative of the tyrannical husband figure that we see in the house and in the play. So it's this attitude that oppresses Nora rather than the money itself. You could also argue that the money gets her to set herself free, because without the loan, she would have no reason to leave following the IOU in the letter. So maybe money is actually helping her get the freedom. He obviously calls her lots of small and cute animals in the beginning, using lots of zoomorphism in order to kind of make her seem pretty and pettable and small and cute and endearing. And even though this is not like the Kite Runner, which is about, you know, whole countries and whole political movements and war, we're dealing here just with a smaller setting of a family home. It does still show us that characters sometimes do have a power imbalance within a domestic setting, as is the case here. And when he bans macaroons and Nora eats them anyway in Act 1, we can say that this is a character, Nora, who is set on breaking away from the regulation and trying to do what she likes to try and give herself some degree of freedom and independence from this kind of dictatorial husband figure. So that could be possible answers or possible paragraph content for your essay about lack of economic independence. For Blake, as I've said in previous videos for section B, the structure of the Blake essay could just be one poem per paragraph. And here this was a nice question about religion being a source of misery rather than comfort and joy. Again, you are within your right to disagree with that and actually have a poem that maybe presents religion in a very nice way. So the first poem could be The Garden of Love. The chapel is representative of religious dogmatism and its imposition on people's lives and people's freedoms and people's pleasures and people's loves. The chapel is locked, the Ten Commandments are written across the door. So even before you get into the church, you are confronted with thou shalt not, and rules and regulation, which Blake is obviously saying is quashing human spirit, which conflicts with his politics as a libertarian. The priests are also walking around in black gowns, binding with briars my joys and desires, as it says in the poem. So there's almost a sense of surveillance here, policing morality and religious loyalty. So that chapel, which has been built on a green place, is a source of misery. Because it's locked, what is it there for? How can it be comforting and joyous if people can't get into it? And therefore you have the kind of the indirect attack of the church being not fit for purpose. And the flowers have been replaced with gravestones and graves, meaning that the child can no longer play there, but also beauty, as represented by the flowers, has been replaced by graves and connotations of decay. The second poem could be The Little Vagabond. Maybe often sometimes overlooked as a poem, but it is a good poem for this question because it is about religion and it's about a child speaker who has the naivety to think that if the church was more like a pub, religion would be more successful. So it's a very naive, optimistic view. There's lots of contrasts in this poem between the pub and the church, or the alehouse and the church, and the warm and the cold. The alehouse is warm and friendly, the church is cold and quite miserable and quite dystopian. So the child believes that if the church was made more like a pub and more like a community hub, maybe the religion would be more popular and fit to serve people better. And there might be some merit in that. You know, churches, I think, are supposed to reach out to the community they serve and be there for people in lots of different ways. Not just a place to pray on a Sunday, but places where they can get food, like in food banks and community centres and play groups and art groups and book groups and all of this. So it's supposed to be a hub of a community. So maybe the child is quite right to have this idea. However, with the church being cold, what Blake is essentially saying is the church is punitive and draconian, and therefore people will kind of stay away from it. The vagabond is a street urchin, so a detached observer, which gives the child maybe credibility because it means that the child is not swayed by religious bias. So the little vagabond here suggests that religion could be a source of comfort and joy, but religion has to change first. Finally, your third paragraph could be The Little Black Boy, in which you disagree with this, because here there is a harmonious depiction of a parent-child relationship and religious being comforting through the mother's lesson that she gives the child underneath the tree. We have the blurring of the white and the black and constant references to heat and the sun as kind of representative of being close to God. So despite the child's black skin, and often at this time of the slave trade as being stigmatized and a subject of prejudice and discrimination and marginalization, the feeling of the heat on the skin represents God's love according to the mother, giving the child resilience and ability to face life, I suppose, and to bear the beams of love. And the sense is that the child has learned that despite its skin colour and despite its inferiority to the white child, that the black child is going to be okay and it's going to have God's love in the afterlife. So you could actually say, well, because of the lesson that the mother gives the black child in that poem, religion can be, in fact, a source of joy and comfort. And in so doing, you're therefore disagreeing with the task there in the green box. So again, a selection of past questions that have already come up for section B of the political and social protest paper for Lit B. Hopefully that was useful. This is by no means indicative content. There are lots of other ideas that might just be as valid. This is just one way you could do it, some ideas, but with English, because it's so subjective and often open-ended, there are lots of other ideas as well that might equally be as valid. You don't have to write 3 paragraphs either. That's just what I use. fits quite nicely on a page like this. But the two main rules, the two golden rules for Literature Spec B, is to answer the question and not veer off on a tangent, and for Blake to pick the right poems, or for prose and for drama to pick the right bits of the text to talk about. Okay, so for example, with the Kite Runner question, you would not want to talk about maybe Sanyabar, because not only she's not a man basically, so there would be a danger that you might start to move away from the kind of the question. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully that was useful to you, and good luck in your upcoming exam. Thank you.